Hey, Michelle, what are we doing today?
Hey, Maddie. So today we're going to be diving into some updates that the Common App recently announced for the 25-26 cycle. And we'll talk about how these changes might affect students and maybe even their application strategy.
Yeah, this stuff really does matter, so let's get into what's changed.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, the Common App or the Common Application, it's basically a free platform where students can apply up to 20 schools using the exact same application. So, it's a big time saver and it's really streamlined the college application process. And they've announced some changes that we're going to go into. But one thing I wanted to just kind of get your take on first is something that they didn't change. And those are the prompts coming up for 25-26. So they actually kept them all the same. So, what was kind of your take on that? Does it matter?
I think they so yeah, do you know what patch notes are, Michelle?
No?
Patch notes are basically it's a video game thing, but it applies to a lot of stuff that
Okay.
every X months a video game will release patch notes where they talk about like what they've changed. And it's
Ah,
always patch note day is a big deal when you follow anything. And certainly I follow sports and like football, like there's new patch notes. My mom plays Mahjong and every April apparently like the new cards come with the new rules and it's like a big deal. And I just laugh at this because I believe I sent you an email like 30 minutes after all these changes were made, be like, yo, here's the new patch notes.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So like I'm not being sarcastic. Like all this stuff is big change. When it comes to the essay prompts, there's no changes, and there usually isn't when it comes. That's why they're patch notes and not like the common app is the common app. And I always feel bad when I poo poo like what has changed is a big deal. Right. So the last time there was a new prompt was actually in the 2021-22 season. I just found it. It was number 4. Reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or
Hmm,
motivated you? That's how rare this is. I remember like trying to like how do I change my strategy? Like what's the strat on this? And
right.
I metagamed it down to the idea is like, well, this is new. So obviously either they want students to pick this one and write about it, or was close to the truth is like they want there to be a more overarching idea of like being gracious, like graciousness is in
Ah,
college admissions in 2021. And I think I steered a bit away from that when I realized like this prompt is terrible. Like reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful. It's probably how has gratitude affected or motivated you? What a bad prompt. I would never have a student pick that one because well it's I actually I don't get that upset, but like this is begging you to write what I refer to as like a my hero essay
ooh,
where you're
yeah,
writing about
okay.
how great or how gracious you are for someone else and how awesome they are, which is a really bad idea and a personal statement. Like personal statement should be about you and your achievements and your interests and your goals. The reality is, when it comes to the Common App, I tend to every November, right, I guess late October before students apply, there's always the emails like, by the way, what prompt do I pick for the personal statement? And then
Right.
and then I go and look at them again, and it always ends up being it's like one, like some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share the story. Like 90% of my students do one because that's what we write about.
Okay.
And then there's also 6, like describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? That's I also you could do 6, but you may have noticed it's the same prompt as 1. It's just asking it in a different
Kind of,
way.
yeah. Uh-huh.
I never have students do 7, like share an essay on your topic of choice because I just think it's kind of
Mhm.
weird.
I was gonna ask you about that one.
Sometimes you could do 5, discussion, accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. Like, and I'm not, but then I never do 3, which reflect on time you question your challenge or belief or idea, what problem you're thinking, what was the outcome, or 2, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental later success. Recount a time when you face a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? I never have students do 2 because I never do personal statements on like bummers at all. Like I do fun personal
Yeah.
statements, so it doesn't come up. With 3 is like this almost feels a bit limiting. The short answer is I always have students pick 1 because 1 is the most generic prompt, and I don't want the person reading the actual essay to be considering the prompt whatsoever. To
Okay.
pick something that isn't 1 is to inherently imply you are answering the question beyond anything. Like, I guarantee you could write an essay that in no way actually covers, like, a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful. That's everything. Like, that is, like,
Yeah,
literally
that's
anything it
true.
could be. So the fact that there are no new prompts doesn't shock me because for the Common App in particular, the essay I like it could be about whatever you want, and
Mhm.
they really do mean that. And I know if I was reading these, that's often how I kind of gauge what like how it should go down. Is I would not even look at what prompt they picked unless it was something weird like 4 or 7, and then I'd be like, "Why'd you pick 4 or 7?"
Okay.
And I know that doesn't help you, just having the person reading this be like, why did you pick a weird prompt that people don't usually pick?" I don't think that gives any points, so that I just have students every also, you should just write about, like, your passions and how much you love learning and etcetera on and that leads one usually works well for that. So the fact that there's no new
Okay.
prompts if there I'll put it this way, if there was a new prompt, we would be talking about why, both like,
Yeah.
is this a good idea or why would they add this? Because it's rare enough that whenever they do, it is a big deal, and that's why I'm talking about like the last time they did. I clearly remember being like, why is this here? What does this mean? And
Okay.
my takeaway was they would like an essay about gratitude. However, I think that's probably not. They don't actually want an essay about gratitude because they want you to write about you. So
Yeah. So for the most part, then you recommend that a student pick their personal statement topic and then find a prompt that fits, not the other way
yeah,
around.
100%,
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
And err on the side of picking a more generic one. Like as, of course, opposed to the UCs, where the UCs have the 8 prompts and you are expected to answer them. And like that's one of the weird divides in college admissions is that the UC
Yes.
prompts I have memorized and could like to the word, and we very carefully pick which ones. It's just that is just a difference in the applications. Also, the supplements also very much matter. People will say they're
Mhm.
not as important. Like, yeah, no, you read the supplements, you answer the question correctly because that's the actual school. When it comes to the comments, I bet a lot of admissions readers don't even know what the prompts are. They just read the
Yeah.
essays, and that's what I would do.
Okay. So one of the changes that they did make was to this community disruption question. So that question was introduced in 2020. I guess it's basically we call it like the COVID question, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So now they've changed it from community disruption to where it's kind of broader now. It's called challenges and circumstances. So now they can share a wider range of experiences like personal hardship, family responsibilities, socioeconomic barriers. They kept the word limit the same though. So you still have 250 words. So what do you think about kind of expanding this section?
I think in the email I sent you 30 minutes after these came out because I was
Yeah.
excited. There was patch notes. I think I noted that when it comes to this essay, that I would almost like it wouldn't be terribly relevant for you because I would likely be working with 1 to 2 students a year to answer this, and that is pretty much where I stand now. Like the additional information, which we'll get to next, like you
Mhm.
heavily handle that, and every single student does, has, and will, at least for us, like have additional information section. What I'm not going to recommend is that every student write 300 words here about like a challenge they overcame and use it as an extra essay spot. Like there is that. I was just entering this world during COVID, and I had to make a quick judgment call. That was one of the big judgment calls I had to make during COVID. Is they added this COVID section.
Mhm.
These changes do matter, and I was reading, and it seemed like the more old school a consultant was, the more their opinion was this is now additional content you can feed them in your application. You should be using this to the best of your ability. And I didn't bite on that, and I could not tell you if that was a good or bad idea. Like actually during COVID or the year after, was it a good idea if even if like not much happened, you were stuck at home to write 250 words about how like 'cause COVID affected everyone in some way.
Right, exactly.
Was it worthy to like get more information in there? And I guess the college consultant in me understands it goes totally, it's like just like the additional
Mhm.
information is like this is your very limited spot that someone has to read. Like you've got to feed them stuff. The writer in me goes, "No, that's tacky and tasteless
Yeah.
and is going to make them not like you because it's gross." And that's why it's a split because the college consultant would be still like, "Who cares, dude? These are all future lawyers reading these. Like this is like yeah, like this is just a way to get more information in. Who cares what they think about you? It's like they say yes or no." I basically settled upon it got easier as we got a year, 2 years, 3 years out from COVID. It's like, no, you're not going to use the COVID box unless there's a damn good reason to do. And
Right.
I think one student used the COVID box in the last 2 years because they personally got sick and they missed a bunch of time. Like it became
Mhm.
a yes, that is a very clear so now we get to this question, and I like this change. First, I'll
Okay.
say is that the basically what they were doing is additional information used to be like a big old band-aid on the college app on the Common App in of itself. That the Common App is pretty well made, I think, but like has an inherent flaw that every student is different, and there's a million and one different problems that can arise. And like, well, what do you do about that? You can't have like a billion tiny little boxes about it. What if someone was arrested? What if someone was struggling with, had bad home life. What if someone missed a class for
Right.
some, it's just like endless stuff that comes up. These are real problems, and there's no real way. This information was this giant 650 word massive text. What if the student has more stuff that they couldn't fit in the application, for
Yeah,
example?
exactly.
And I think they have wisely split the additional information box into two segments. This is the official removal of the COVID box. So, like, no, nothing happened. And it makes sense because COVID had now happened when current applying students were in middle school, so it's no longer relevant to their high school
Right.
career,
So
as
they're
I
kind
say.
of moving on
Yeah,
from
but
COVID.
right. So, what is this box for? If there is something that happened in a student's high school career that was notably challenging, and I believe in particular caused a negative impact on their either grades or extracurriculars or their ability to perform at the best level. Specifically, something that they now believe they have worked past and believe they're on their best bright future. That will now
Mhm.
go in this box, and I believe it will not be an essay. It won't be boom crack. I hear the. It will instead be, I think, a pretty low. I think I use the term is like straightforward but detached. Is I think the way I describe it. Straightforward attach analysis of what happened, how it impacted you, what you've done to try to work on it, and how you believe you are now ready for the future challenges ahead. And yeah, don't shy away from it. Basically, if something made your grades bad, like it goes here. Like that is
Mhm.
I bet 80-90% of the time, if I'm working on this box with a student, it will be because their grades are not what they wanted to be, and there's a reason why. And we will discuss it, and we will bring it up, and I will do so knowing this is the best we can do. However, it's still not good to not have A's when you're trying to go to like elite schools or anything like that. Like the reality is, I bet there are a lot more students that are not kind of in. We don't attract the type of students that will use this box as much so far because
True.
we tend to work with students that well things didn't go wrong, I guess, more often than not, because that's why they are now hiring expensive college level to try to get into the top schools in America because there isn't that big thing they have to answer. And the limited experience we have, yeah, I guess I'm glad this box exists, but I will not use it with the majority of students because there's nothing to explain.
Okay, I was gonna say you don't think that, like, every student needs to find a reason for
No,
this
no, no,
section.
no,
Okay.
no. It's the exact opposite. In fact, I bet there'll be scenarios in which a student did struggle. A lot of students do struggle. However, I will ask them, did it affect your grades? No. Did it affect your extracurriculars? A little. Not really. Like it's still all here. Then we just leave it blank, and that is
Okay.
totally fine. Do please understand that the average student of mine will not touch this block whatsoever unless there is a reason to do so. And even if so, I will be making sure it is to explain away a problem in your application. If there's a wart and there is a reasonable explanation to do so, it goes here. If only so far as I almost feel like this box is a quarantine zone to allow students to write about that so they don't accidentally completely ruin their application by writing about in their personal statement something that went wrong, which is
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And I mean, how personal do you think students should get in this section, but without like overdoing it?
Well, I believe I use the term objective but detached.
Mhm.
So you're given 250 words. I believe, yeah, that's the size of one good paragraph or two good paragraphs, and I think it should follow basically the plot line of in 11th grade, I was having difficulties at home. My mom was sick with this thing, or my dad was away from work. It caused a lot of distress in my life. You can also like be honest. You can say it's like like the biggest problem was my sister needed to get to class every morning. And I was driving her, and that was actually very difficult for me because I didn't have a car. But like, don't wallow, but explain what the problem was. Like the unfortunate circumstance is I didn't leave me a lot of time to be like studying for the classes like I should like I was in the years prior. The result of that is I tended to I only had so much time. I put emphasis on the classes that I was most interested in, which were like math and science. However, that I didn't have enough time or energy, perhaps, to do the best work I should have on like my English papers. Because of that, I things moved. Things were moving pretty quickly at the time, but like suddenly I had a B minus in my English, in my English and history classes, and
Mhm.
by the time I worked hard to get them back up, but at that point it was a little bit too late. I ended up with B pluses in both. I was like, that bummed me. I often realize like that really bummed me out. A lot I always have. I've done this with students. It's
Yeah.
generic, I guess, but it's like it's bummed me out both because I do care about my class, both because these grades aren't what I'm expecting of myself. As I look forward, but also because I do generally care about the subject matter, and it feels bad for me not to be able to put the work in to showcase that interest. Because of other outside circumstances. Then you get to like, what'd you do about it?
Mhm.
The good news is over the summer I was able to get my own car. Like there should be a point of inflection where you still get my own car, and because of that, I was able to save a lot more time getting my sister to school. I also doubled down, making sure put extra emphasis on those classes to make sure that I wasn't slipping in the way I had. As a result, I was very happy to see my grades bring back up to an A, while keeping my other science and math classes at the same level. I'm happy with, and that is very much what it always leads. It's like that is very much what I expect to continue doing, including as I head over to
Mm.
my next chapter in college.
Okay, so they need to like tie it back to specifics of their grades in specific classes and also kind of give like a resolution or solution.
Yeah, yeah, it should because you really only need to be answering this is if there's a problem in your application,
Mhm.
and that's why we'll have a conversation. Is like, yeah, we have many students that like things do go bad. In 4 years in high school, all sorts of things can happen. But if it doesn't affect their grades and it doesn't really affect their extracurriculars, I tend to just not bring it up. Like, who cares? Like, like
Okay.
it's not coming up in the essays. We don't write about that there, and if you didn't if you didn't struggle, if you didn't have worse grades, I don't see how writing about something that lousy that happened to you while you're in high school is going to make you a stronger applicant. If anything, it will just be like, oh, okay. And but I guess I say that as I very much do not subscribe to the overcoming adversity view of college admissions.
Mhm.
And that's something we've talked about before, and you certainly understand, is that I do not believe, I certainly don't do sob stories, but I generally don't believe that the way this process works is that schools are looking for students that have overcome challenges inherently. They're looking for students that, well, that love learning, but have basically
Right.
achieved at a high level, have passions for what they have achieved, and want to continue doing so at their school by taking advantage of their opportunities. The overcoming difficulties doesn't really come into that. And if anything, like, well, how'd you overcome difficulties to still love math as much as you do? But even if you don't include that, they don't care. It's like
Right.
yeah, like the challenges that my students will bring up will be a difficulty they had getting to experience the math they wanted to at the level they did. Like,
Yeah.
that is different, like real difficulties. And maybe that feels weirdly cynical in a way, but it's simply how I think. And like, this is just a competition to see who's the most qualified to be a student at the school. So like, why would they care so much about like the crappy things that happen in your life? Like compared to like job interviews, they don't care. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, like we compare this to job interviews makes more sense because like in a job interview, you wouldn't bring up like your like something crappy that's happening in your home life if it's not, especially if it's not impacting your ability to do your job, and they don't really want to hear it. If you bring it up, they're just going to be confused, if anything. So like that's how I see it.
Okay. So if it didn't negatively impact you, you don't really need to put it in here then.
You don't need to, and my students will not. How about that? Is
Okay.
that
Okay.
like every year there will be 1 to 3 students that we will write about this, and of those 3, only 1 or 2 of them I will really feel like confident, like this is the right idea. So and there'll be another 1 to 2 students that we decide not to do it because it's not important.
And how heavily do you think that this question is weighed when admissions officers are reviewing the application?
I think it heavily depends upon where you're applying and who you are. When it comes to elite college admissions, top 20 type schools, if it impacted your grades, that's bad because these
Mhm.
top schools at the end of the day are very protective of their freshman profile GPAs. And I stand by that. That their average freshman GPA is the freshman profile, the average student they have at top 20, just so you can look, is like a 3.93, 3.94 at every single school. And at the end of the day, any student they accept that has a lower than 3.94-ish unweighted GPA for any reason is a burden upon their freshman stats. It is difficult for them, and they have to be very, very, very selective about who they accept in order to keep their
Yeah.
numbers the way they are. And that simply does not leave a lot of leeway in regards to a student having like there being a reason for
Mhm.
it. That sucks, but it's just the nature of the process. I guess I don't know as well when you move further down the list because we don't have as many students applying to those schools. This is me genuinely saying I'm not sure. It's similar like demonstrated improvement, right? Where the idea of if your grades improve as you go through high school, in theory that should be helpful, but I don't think it helps much at all at the top level because if your freshman grades aren't good enough, your average GPA is still too low. And the
Mhm.
level we work at, when especially when it comes to grades, I don't think it'll be terribly helpful because you just don't match their benchmarks. As you move further down the list, I do think they'll read it. I don't know. I genuinely do not know because I don't have a huge data set that explains it. But even in the same vein, it's really only that important if you're explaining away grades. Like with extracurriculars, I would much rather just basically dress up what they've done and kind of like fudge some dates on like the timelines to make everything hunky dory. It's because
Rather than using this space.
rather than using this
Okay.
space, right?
Okay. And then, this is like a really, I guess, delicate question, or it could be, depending on what a student is going to be putting here. Do you recommend that they find somebody to like review it and make sure it sounds appropriate? Because this one seems like it could really, I don't know,
Yeah,
get.
I think I think that's fair. I think talking to someone, both should you use it
Mhm.
is a good question, and if so, Yeah, why? And if so, what should you write? And I kind of just talked through it. Like that is basically the template I give students is like,
Yes. Mhm.
what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What was the outcome that you're unhappy with? Why was that? Why are you unhappy with that outcome? What changed that makes you feel that made things better? How did this is very helpful. How did this change improve your ability to like get back to like hunky dory? Super important. How do you plan to continue doing whatever change you've made as you finish high school and enter college? Like that is the template for how it should read. If you're going to use this box, I do believe it is in your best interest to make sure at least some adults or some teachers look it over to make sure that you're not accidentally writing something. I guess I don't know how it could go awry because I am I when if and when students are because this is just going additional information. Like when they do it, like
Right.
I have I'm extremely overarching and like making sure we do it exactly correct. All these boxes are very delicate. So you're right. I do believe it behooves students doing this to make sure that it's how they want to come off. Because done poorly, it could go very, very, very bad. Because people are going,
Yes.
especially now that it's like the community disruption box. Like when a student fills out, they're going to read it. I promise you, they will read this
Yeah.
box, and you do not want that. It's also these boxes come at the end of the application. It's going to be like the last or one of the last things they see about you.
Exactly.
You do not want them to have the wrong takeaway, let's say, because that will heavily influence their opinion as they finish your application. You're correct.
Another change that Common App is making, I guess, kind of in partnership with this, is the additional information section. You used to have 650 words, but now they've reduced it. So it's 300. So before, I mean, you've used it to do like personal challenges, maybe explain extracurriculars in more detail, unusual academic situations. So, does that change now that we have this other section and we have a shorter amount of words to be used here?
Sure. So I would say that I mentioned like one or two students would use this box to talk about like something bad that went down. And then another three or four, I can't think of any examples, but they would just use it to explain a situation or talk about something. And often I was a little iffy if they should, but it was like if anything that was confusing on their application. So if they took like college
Mhm.
courses and they weren't sure if they were accredited, a lot of times students aren't entirely certain if they'll be like their citizenship is like currently still being figured out.
Yes.
Often it's students that I will be begging for them, just like, can we not include this? Some weird class scheduling thing that I know is
Oh,
very
yeah.
important to them, and I know it drove them insane because, like, someone screwed up somewhere, and they know how much their parents have been like, but I'm like, "Dude, this is just confusing. No one cares." So lots of like that, but that's often pretty I remember a student, like, what I was thinking as a student clarified what he identifies as, like, his nationality because he has a pretty mixed heritage, like, there's stuff like that. Like, that's
Okay.
where the Band-Aid section is, and yes, if they're, like,
Yeah.
pretty surely if there's something you want them to know, it's often just not even words, but, like, I'll call them yellow flags. Like, if there's something that's confusing about like your thing, yeah, go ahead and try to break it down as clearly and just write a paragraph that really explains what's going on. You don't have to do a lot of
Mhm.
insight. I guess I'll bounce back to you though. Is generally the 80, 90% or 100% you're doing with students. That's your job. What do you do with students? What were you doing on the additional information beforehand when you had 650 words, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this one it can be tricky because it feels like every student wants to use the section. So we
Oh, they
usually
should.
yeah,
Also, important to note: every student of mine fills out the additional information section pretty thoroughly, pretty much to the word count.
yes. And so definitely, we make sure that we're not writing like a whole other essay because I think, just like you said, these are the last things that an admissions officer is left with. So we don't want to dump on here things that should have already been put in their application. So we use it for like what you were talking about schedule changes, citizenship explanations. A lot of it is like extracurriculars. So things that they wish they could have put into their activities list, but they weren't and wasn't able to fit in there. So maybe a little bit more explanation about what they've achieved or different awards or like an abstract, a description of an abstract of a paper that they've done.
Yes, it tends to vary on, like, based on the student, but in general, this is I guess maybe a little ironic considering I just poo-pooed, like, the other section, but students, you wanna use digital information. Like, this is where I mentioned, like, the college holder versus writer aspect. Like, I'm back into college consulting here. This is a box where they give you more space to write about whatever
Right.
you want. We may very well do it, like, an entire episode about the digital information section if you want, because, like,
Yeah.
we should probably break it down. It's all roads lead to the digital information section is a line I find myself saying with students throughout the year. And that's because it is this giant band-aid at the end of the application in order to dump whatever you want. And that's why it ends up being my band-aid whenever I'm like, oh yeah, like how do where do we put this? Like, additional information section. We'll get to it. Then we'll get to it. And then we do, and it's effective. You but what we add is it's not just more stuff. Like, it kind of is, like, it's kind of more stuff, like, in
Yeah, a little
hindsight,
bit.
but it's you basically, it's bullet points. Yeah, we'll do an entire episode on it, we can do it together, but basically, the additional information is 10 the way I describe it is if there's it's like projects. I think one of the biggest flaws of the Common App, something I hope, you know, if you boys, if you hear this, something they should add along with the extracurriculars, which the problem is extracurriculars are very short. There's not enough space for all of them. Like, so that, like, this is also your
Yes.
wheelhouse. So that leads to a lot of stuff getting dropped. But the big one is there's nowhere to really write about within an organization or within a project. If there was something I guess within an organization or within a club or what have you, if there's a project you did or something very specific that itself is a big deal, there's nowhere to really write about that. And that's what I always say is I remember, like, someone was in a World Health Organization group, and they through that they put on like an entire school wide like animal conservation
Mhm.
program like in their gym, and like the president of the WHO was there, like a senator was there, and that's rad. However, there's nowhere in the application to really write about that. And I guess you could use an essay to just talk about it, but you don't really want to do that either.
Right.
That's where this information has always been super helpful. I think also you said abstracts is also good.
Mhm.
But then you have 650 words, and I kinda like this change as well because a lot I mentioned in the email to you, a lot of students, I would look at rich information, my takeaway was like, "You didn't need to put this here, like, you didn't need to
I
put this here,
know.
you didn't need to put this here." And even students that wrote about, like, something being hard, like, the first paragraph would be about that, we'd use, 200 words on it, and then there'd be 450 words of like, and then, like, a little line I would make, and it'd be like, "Oh, and here's more information about my app I made." So you're still including it. Yeah, I think that this is going to remain the same basic premise, just more condensed. And the
Mhm.
general strategy is don't just dump like a second resume. That's a bad idea. Like, anything that's important enough to be in a resume should be in your actual extracurricular section. What kind of stuff tends to make it? It's like I mentioned the projects and the research. Is
Yes.
there anything else that comes up a lot?
Yeah, we kind of frame it as like this is something that I'm particularly proud of, but Common App didn't give me enough room, but I really want to tell you about
Yeah,
this.
and within it, it's basically bullet point sentences talking about different aspects of it. But yes, we're going to do an episode in the near future. We'll talk about different additional information because it is such a core aspect of the application that there's so many different opinions on it. But what this change means to me is that it's going to be a basic similar strategy. Maybe just because usually it's how many big topics do you think students are usually bringing up? Like usually, I'd say like two or three.
Yeah, about that.
Right, so it should be 1 to 2, which is what it always should have been, and if it's 1, you can basically really go in depth, but if it's 2, the bullet points should be a little bit more condensed to really get the good information. If anything, I expect to look at these and be like, "This looks like probably what it always should have looked like," so, like, that's yeah,
Right.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, because these should not be written like an essay format. These should be like very brief bullet points.
Yeah, yeah, it's basically almost like filling like your extracurricular sheets, and yeah, who, what, when, where, and why kinda stuff. Maybe and then one flavor text be like, "Really enjoyed the process because it allowed me to explore my adventures in computer science," and that kinda thing. You get, like, a little bit of that, but yeah, bullet points help keep students away from, like, essayifying it because that's not what it's for, it's just more
Right.
information. This one, it's hard for me to believe there have been too many students that were, like, on the maybe pile and then, like, a great additional information put them over the top,
Mhm.
but it is just more stuff, and I like it because the student is glad they can get it somewhere, and the reality is if you don't put it there, it's not anywhere else, the person reading it will never know what you did.
Right.
So, do you really want them to know A, do you really want them to know about this? B, if this isn't here, will they ever get to know about it? Is it anywhere else in your application? If that's the case, then yeah, go ahead and include it because then when they're reading it, they won't be annoyed because at worst they'll be like, I get why the student wanted me to know this. You know, it likely doesn't impact their decision, but what you do not want is annoying them. That's the case.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why I guess I'm weirdly particular and have kinda kids gloves with a lot of this stuff because it comes at the very end of the application and is all a little meta. It is all like you can kinda do whatever you want. And because of that, I'm very much constantly trying to think like what will it actually be like when the person reads this at the very end. And generally the takeaway should be it should provide more context and information in a way that is like slightly positive because then all we're mostly trying to do is if they like you, they will still like you.
Mhm. Yes.
That's probably the best and most common result is if they already like you and want you in. This certainly isn't going to break anything.
Okay. And then how do students decide which section to use? I mean, things that are kind of on the edge, like Like you said, their school has like weird schedules or things like that. Does that go in the circumstances box or the additional information?
Interesting. This is why passion notes are exciting. Like, this is real cool. This is like we're learning like
Or like the citizenship or yeah, like things like that. Does that still go?
community disruption. That's what they call it. Feel free to include like a short, tiny little thing about like if there was a problem with like your GPA with your class scheduling, whatever. Yeah, you could throw that in community disruption, I suppose, and just explain away. This doesn't have to be some massive challenge you overcame. It could be just like
Okay.
explain away. Yeah, because really what they've done is they've split additional information into two halves, and that's I get why they did that because I often these are the two basic reasons I would fill it out with students. And the top half I would be handling because it usually involves well, like sensitive material or just something very convoluted that we need to like make sure they know. Additional information
Mhm.
is generally closer to the extracurricular stuff. And yeah, if you want to break it up that way, if you just want to like during the community disruption, but you don't use all 250 words. You know, like you can
Yes.
if you have a couple tiny little things you just want to mention about your class scheduling or an issue you have with whatever, yeah, go ahead, put it in there. Yeah, it won't matter, but yeah, it won't. Yeah, it won't matter, but it also won't annoy them, and that's often how I feel about additional
Right. And
information
it's
content.
okay like to not use the whole word count for either of
100%.
these. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but we students and you and
We
I
still do.
we have a tendency of you don't have to.
Okay, and so moving on to the last change, which I find this one like pretty interesting, is Georgetown, which has had its own application for years. They've announced that they're going to join the Common App starting in the 26-27 application cycle. So that's they're actually one of the only schools, the only ones I can think of is like the UCs, MIT, and I guess Texas maybe. I don't know if I'm missing one, but those are the only ones that have their very own application. So like, what did the, Georgetown application look like before?
It was
Yeah.
annoying. I'm glad they're joining the Common App. It was another school that I would go before we would do because
Yes.
yeah, it was annoying. We had to go find it, and everything they wanted in a PDF format, and all of their stuff is by page size, and
Yeah.
yeah, so, like, that's how like, we're deep in the game here, like, good, like, join the I like the Common App, I think they do a good job, and, yeah, I guess I'm just glad that's just for formatting reasons
Mhm.
is my biggest annoyance. Yeah, they would basically yeah, Texas and Penn State maybe? I don't like I'm a little mixed up because
Okay.
there used to be schools that had their own application, but were also on coalition and yeah, like join the empire guys. Like MIT isn't like other girls, so they're gonna keep having their own thing.
Yeah.
The UCs I very much understand why they have their own application. They're a system in of themselves. But Georgetown was always just a weird outlier that I had to do with students that I think their actual questions are pretty reasonable, like their actual application. But basically, what it is they had a prompt that was like 500 words that was, or one page, single spaced or whatever, that was very obviously a surrogate for your personal statement. Then it just required. It was just like some assembly required. It just required me to like have to figure out logistics like formatting and like spacing and stuff like that in lieu of basically stuff that absolutely could have just been on the Common App.
Mhm.
So I guess this you're saying it's starting next year. So this is the last year there'll be the solo application.
Right.
Yeah, because this was one of the this is the before we began. I was like, "Ooh, Georgetown's on the Common App." Like I didn't know this
Yeah.
one. So good, good. Like I guess it will be now 15% less annoying to apply to Georgetown for me and other students around the country. I suppose.
What do you think their motivation was? Because they were named in, like, a lawsuit in December saying they favored, like, wealthy students. Is this to try to make it more, like, inclusive, level the playing field, to make it easier?
I guess I would have to know why they've held out so long because
Yeah.
I joined this industry in 2019, and when I joined, the only real outlaws, if you will, were a number of state schools that were you could either fill out their application like Texas and Penn State and UWash Seattle and UIUC, or you could use the coalition. And the coalition app, you even know what the coalition app is? I'm sure you've
Kind
done it with
of,
some
yeah. Hardly anyone ever uses it.
heaven would you be doing the coalition if we were still in that world? Oh my god. Oh my god, would you be handling the coalition work for me? Yeah, it was basically a secondary app and like this it failed, It was trying to disrupt the
Mhm.
common app, didn't work. Well, yeah, I guess I'd have to the first question is like, why did they continue being this one outlier, strange, like like esteemed private school that would not go onto the common app because they are an outlier and I don't have a great reason why. You have to find me that
Mhm.
first. But then the answer why they go back is I would have to imagine because at some point they realized they're missing out on X thousand applicants every year by not being on the Common App. They're not the only school to be sued in the last couple of years is the thing.
True.
Yeah,
True.
yeah. I would have to know why they've been holding out in the first place because the Common App is pretty legitimate and I would guess they would shift just because some man in a suit showed them like an Excel spreadsheet that showcased how they were losing 12,000 applications a year to similar, and I'm sure Notre Dame was on there and like UVA or
Yeah.
whatever. Like it's because probably because Notre Dame is getting an extra 30,000 applications a year over them. They're like, we got to get back on the Common App.
Yeah, don't
we're
you think there's gonna be
similar.
tons of students who would not have applied to Georgetown before who are gonna add it to their Common App now?
Yeah,
So it's going to increase their numbers and probably decrease their acceptance rate.
yeah, I would need to look deeper into the raw numbers, but totally because well, I know that I, as a trained professional college consultant, take an extra sigh when it's time to do Georgetown because it's going to be a
Yeah.
headache. Well, that scales. That means of the millions and millions of students applying around the world, a good number of that, and then also it's my job to explain how we do Georgetown and what it even means. It's some there's going to be a balk of X percent of students either like they don't know about Georgetown because it's not on the list, or
Mhm.
they look at it and they be like, bro, I don't want to do this, or they're doing it at some point. And to be fair, it's like school number 15 of 23 in their priority list, and they're like, screw this, I'm not doing Georgetown. I don't even care. I don't even know where it is. Those kids add up. You know, there's a
Yep.
million like you are creating artificial barriers to have students apply to your school. I if I ran Georgetown, they would be on the Common App a long time ago. Let me say it's like I'm glad they
Mhm.
are. And yeah, otherwise I'm not trying to bear like the Georgetown application I think is pretty reasonable. I like the questions they ask. They changed it up a lot. It's fine. You know, Georgetown's a great school. Yeah, this is I guess this is a long time coming because it's not like they are the last domino to fall.
Right.
By the time I started working, the only other dominoes were in cahoots with some scammy upstart like VC startup Common App Challenger. That was 2019. There were no, like, and then also there was Georgetown. And now I just accepted it. Now we're 7 years later. And Georgetown's like, fine, we'll go on the Common App. Like, okay, cool, welcome, I guess. Like that's how I see it. This isn't, yeah, it's putting into perspective that like 6 years have been like, and then also Georgetown's weird. And it's like Georgetown also has like REA for some reason. Like I don't know. It's because whoever's in charge there is incompetent. I'm sorry. Like that's why this is why this is why it took so long.
Yeah. Do you think this is going to have an impact on, like, their prestige? More or
It
will
always
more
does.
students be aware of Georgetown or seeing the acceptance rate
Well
drop or
Georgetown sits in that comfortable group with your USCs of the world and your Notre Dames and your Carnegie Mellons, and it's pretty I think that, like, the Georgetown brand is doing pretty well already. It's in the
Mhm.
same way that Georgetown is going to continue to be what I've basically like a middle class reach, as I call it, where it's students there's students in that range, they rarely want to go there if they do. Let me explain. Is that students that get into Georgetown or like, they often wanted to go to Harvard or Yale or Duke or what have you.
Mhm.
Whereas students who would love to go there don't get in because it's hard to get into Georgetown. And this isn't a Georgetown thing. There's also USC and Notre Dame. Like there's like schools in that range. It tends to be like
Right.
it's kind of the middle point between your true top 20 elite schools and then like everything else. So I don't see much changing. I think I see this me being like, "Oh, thank God, Georgetown's on Common App now,"
Now you could just add it.
and I'll go at some point that I'll look at their stats and suddenly they'll have an extra 12, 15, 20,000 applications. And yeah, like they now get to join they probably had a consultant be like, why aren't you on the Common App? Because every school is their acceptance rates are going down every year because more and more students are
Mhm.
applying to 20 schools. Like I would have, by the way, we'll talk about that again. Like it's from like I wish it was the 1980s and like our students would still be applying to 20 schools. Like, but yeah, like they are. My guess is that they are seeing that rush and they are not getting quite the same rush because that entire arms race is built upon the Common App, making it so easy and accessible for students to do so. And they are.
Mhm.
I'm sure their numbers are going up. I'm sure we could double check them but not at the same rate of I would have to imagine Notre Dame is their number one competitor, is there of the other Jesuit similarly strong private university. And my guess, you
Right,
look at the
right.
numbers, Notre Dame is not lapping, but is increasing faster than they are. So they had a pretty logical explanation. Like, let's stop being idiots and put us on the Common App, like we should have been for the last decade.
Well, those are all the changes that the Common App has announced that we've covered. So hopefully this will help students with the upcoming application cycle stay ahead of the game.
Yeah, and I think showcasing just how much you and I talk about, like the information, like just how much we talk about the nitty gritty of what might seem to some slash that I still know in 2021 they changed the prompt one time.
Mhm.
That's a combination of like this stuff does matter, it is important, but also just like how in. That's why passion notes only matter if you're a crazy person who plays the game every day. Like that's the key. I hope the takeaway is from students to be like that these people are nuts and like yes, that's the point
Yes.
because I think I mentioned again, it's like often an advantage of working with people like us is that we do know this process well enough and are like by doing it over and over and over again, the little changes do matter in a way that can be, I guess, helpful towards an overall application. Like understand it both showcases that we understand what's really going on, like how this works, but also that there is like a meta element that I think we talked about a lot. It's like what how do we play these little changes a little bit differently? It showcases
Mhm.
just how much that like how much it helps to have to work with someone like with the foresight and like the knowledge base that these little changes they like they know what how to play them as well. I guess because most students will never even know that you know that the personal statement used to be 500 words? Like, I always think about that example. It was 500 words for, like, a 6 or 7-year period there,
Oh,
and I
wow.
consider that the most insane thing that's ever happened to college. I no one knows that anymore, and I didn't until I learned. But that's basically the idea. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be back next year talking about the new patch notes because this process will always evolve.
Exactly.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll do it again next time.
Yeah. See ya.
I am now taking on students for the 2025-26 college admissions season. If you are a current junior who's looking for help specifically with their college application and essays, you should check out my website. It's collegewithmattie.com, and there you can see my services, my blog with other written posts, as well as book out a free consultation where you get a chance to chat with me and see how I might be able to help. Looking forward to meeting with you.